Let me begin first by apologizing for not being with you in person, but my mother, Hester Kool, a 90-year-old Holocaust survivor from the Netherlands, died here in Seattle on Tuesday night. I've been here for the past 2.5 weeks helping to care for her, and thus this is all kind of late for me, and I can't be back in Victoria. And I'd just like to introduce you because I noticed there's some family pictures behind me, but I would attract your attention to that picture there. It's my father's family in Amsterdam. And this picture was taken just before the Germans invaded the Netherlands. It's my father's mother's sisters and brother and all of their family. They came together for a family event. And of that picture, one person survived. All the rest were murdered. So in terms of the Holocaust, that's the kind of mortality rate that my family had. So I'd like to begin by reading something from the Megillat HaShoah, the Holocaust Scroll, written in 2003. Long is the history of the eternal people, extending for millennia, including good years and bad years, tranquil years and dreadful years, in its own land and in diaspora lands, among the nations and as a free people. It enjoyed long periods of repose, during which it contributed of its endowments to fellow mortals, bestowing upon them the Sabbath and faith in one God, the book of books, and the teaching of the prophets. At times, however, in darkened and difficult days, it struggled under the burdens imposed by vanquishers and subjugators. It was afflicted, body and soul, by religious wars and persecutions, burnings at the stake, and being crowded into ghettos, blood libels and pogroms, expulsions and exiles, degradation and derision. The people had neither serenity nor tranquility, and the monster of Jew hatred again and again threatened to swallow it whole, rose up against it in every generation, attempting to destroy it. Nevertheless, the people gritted its teeth, accepted the heavenly judgment, and, groaning even at times, stretched its neck on the sacrificial altar. Homeless and hunted, it sought a safe haven, a refuge for resting a while, until the time of wrath had passed. But what befell the people Israel in Nazi Europe, however, is beyond classification, and what confronted its sons and daughters defies description. The German election of 1933 brought Adolf Hitler and his fascist-oriented National Socialist Party to power. However, 44% of German voters cast their votes for Hitler, while 56% did not. Not all Germans were Nazis, and not all Nazis were Germans. But with Hitler's appointment as Chancellor, the democracy of the Weimar Republic was soon suspended. Fear was everywhere, and the Jews, as the Nazi program had promised, were the target of organized government repression. As the rhetoric against the Jews increased and government policy was enacted, Jewish isolation from their countrymen became more intense. The great spokesman and communal leader for German Jewry, Rabbi Leo Beck, composed this prayer to be read on the eve of Yom Kippur, the Holy Day of Atonement, in 1935. The Gestapo banned its reading and arrested Rabbi Beck. Although it was composed before Kristallnacht, its underlying theme of helplessness, terror, and bewilderment at punishments that are not deserved, coupled with the pride he felt and courage he showed, helps us to re-enter that era so that we might directly feel the plight of the threatened Jews of Europe. Let me read it in part. In this hour, all Israel stands before God, the judge and the forgiver. In his presence, let us all examine our ways, our deeds, and what we have failed to do. Where we have transgressed, let us openly confess we have sinned. And, determined to return to God, let us pray, forgive us. With the same fervor with which we confess our sins, the sins of the individual and of the community, do we, in indignation and abhorrence, express our contempt for the lies concerning us and the defamation of our religion and its testimonies. We have trust in our faith and in our future. Who made known to the world the mystery of the eternal, the one God? Who imparted to the world the comprehension of the purity of conduct and purity of family life? Who taught the world respect for man, created in the image of God? Who spoke of the commandments of righteousness, of social justice? In all this, we see manifest the spirit of the prophets, the divine revelation to the Jewish people. By these facts, we repel the insults flung against us. We stand before our God, on him we rely. For him issues the truth and the glory of our history, our fortitude amidst all change of fortune, our endurance in distress. Our history is a history of nobility of soul, of human dignity. It is history we have recourse to when attack and grievous wrong are directed against us, when affliction and calamity befall us. God has led our fathers from generation to generation. He will guide us and our children through these days. We bow to him and stand erect before men. Through the 1930s, the isolation and persecution of Jews in Germany and then in Austria after the Anschluss in March 1938 continued. Jews could no longer work in the civil service, practice their professions, teach at universities, be officers of the courts. And then in late October 1938, thousands of Polish Jews living in Germany were expelled, sent to no man's land along the Polish-German border. This is from a postcard in the possession of Herschel Greenspan, born in Hanover, Germany, to Polish Jewish parents, but then living in Paris. It was received by him on 3 November 1938 from his sister Bertha. You have undoubtedly heard of our great misfortune. I will give you a description of what happened. On Thursday night, there were rumors circulating that all Polish Jews of our city had been expelled. However, we refused to believe them. On Thursday night at 9 p.m., a local policeman came to our house and told us we had to go to the police headquarters with our passports. We went, just as we were all together, to the police headquarters, accompanied by the policeman. There we found almost our entire neighborhood had already assembled. A police wagon then took us at once to the town hall. Everyone was taken there. We had not yet been told what it was about, but we quickly realized that it was the end for us. An expulsion order was thrust into our hands. We had to leave Germany before October 29th, Saturday. We were not allowed to return to our homes. I begged to be allowed to return home to get at least a few essential things, so I left with a policeman accompanying me, and I packed a valise with the most necessary clothes. That is all I could save. We don't have a cent. On the next day, on November 4th, in the newspaper Pariser Heint, it was reported, critical situation of Polish Jews deported from Germany. More than 8,000 persons have been overnight made stateless. They were rounded up and deported, largely to Zboczen, in no man's land between Germany and Poland. Their living conditions are uncomfortable and distressing. 1,200 of them have fallen ill and several hundred are without shelter. As there is risk of epidemic, Red Cross doctors, with the help of doctors from the charity working to help the children, have distributed typhus vaccinations and 10,000 aspirin tablets. A number of cases of insanity and suicide have been reported. A few days later, this young man walked into a gun shop in Paris wanting to buy a gun. It was clear to the owner, Monsieur Karp, that the customer knew nothing about guns, and after some discussion, the owner suggested a 6.35 millimeter 5-shot hammerless revolver, a small gun that would fit into the palm of one hand. Monsieur Kopp demonstrated how to load and unload and how to ready the trigger mechanism for firing. And then, in accordance with the law, he asked for his customer's name and address and for his identity papers. Monsieur Kopp filled out the declaration form for Herschel to hand in to the local police station, wrapped the gun and the box of cartridges separately, and gave it to Herschel Greenspan. Herschel walked out of the shop and crossed the Boulevard Saint-Denis and went into the Café Tout va bien. And in the basement toilet, he unwrapped his purchases, loaded 5 cartridges into the chambers of the revolver. Then, with the gun in one pocket and the box of cartridges in the other, he left the cafe, taking the metro to Solferino, a station on the Boulevard Saint-Germain, and walked to an elegant 4-story mansion. Above it, the scarlet, white, and black swastika flag of the Third Reich. Number 78 Rue de Lille housed the German embassy. Herschel had never been to the embassy before and asked the policeman which office he should go to, as he wanted to apply for a German entry visa. Directed to the embassy concierge, he asked to see the German ambassador, and as he did so, a casually dressed man in his 50s strolled past on his way out of the embassy, Count Johannes von Welczek, the ambassador himself. Although he overheard Herschel's request, Welczek ignored it. There were plenty of staff on duty to handle such visitors, and he was off on his morning constitutional. His silence saved his life. Herschel climbed to the first floor of the embassy, where he asked the receptionist in German I would like to see a person of some importance who is au courant with German secrets. I have an important document to deliver. The receptionist offered to pass the document on, but Herschel insisted he must hand it over personally. The porter showed him into the waiting room and contacted the only official who was on duty at that hour, Ernst vom Rath, the third secretary. Vom Rath told him to bring the young man up to his office. When Herschel was brought into the small, overcrowded room, von Rath was seated at his desk facing the window, his back to the door, opening the morning mail, and invited Herschel to take a seat, and then turned his own chair so that he was facing him. He asked to see the important document Greenspan was supposed to be carrying. For some seconds, Herschel did not reply. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and screamed, "You are a filthy Boche, and here in the name of 12,000 persecuted Jews is your document." Pulling out his revolver, he readied the trigger mechanism and fired 5 shots at the young diplomat at a range of less than 2 meters. Vom Rath half rose from his chair, turning the left side of his body toward the gun in a pure reflex action. The first bullet entered below the rib cage. The victim slumped sideways over the desk. The second shot entered his left side, slightly above the entry wound caused by the first. "I don't intend to escape," he said to the embassy staff who subdued him. "I won't do anything more." Medical help was summoned for von Rath. The French police arrested the assailant. As they walked, Herschel suddenly spoke again. "I've just shot a man in his office. I do not regret it. I did it to avenge my parents, who are living in misery in Germany." Herschel Greenspan was 17 years old. He disappeared into the French legal system, he disappeared into the German legal system, and he turns up in various places through the war years, through the occupation, and then disappears, his presumed death unrecorded. And then the whirlwind, the night of 9 and early morning of 10th of November, 1938. Tuesday, November 8th, 1938. The Völkischer Beobachter carries a first report about the assassination attempt in Paris. At the same time, it complains that, quote, "within our borders, hundreds of thousands of Jews still control entire blocks of stores." The editorial closes with the threat that, quote, "the shots fired in the German embassy in Paris will not just mark the beginning of a new German attitude toward the Jewish question." That night, there are local attacks in several German towns against Jewish businesses and homes, and several synagogues are set ablaze. These were, in all instances, preceded by party rallies in commemoration of the Hitler Putsch of 1923, and speeches of incitement were made by local party officials, and those were followed by the outbreak of, quote, "spontaneous actions" by the party and the brown shirt SA. At 9 p.m., Hitler delivers his traditional speech in the Munich Bierbraukeller restaurant, home of the failed beer hall putsch in 1923, but does not mention the assassination attempt. On Wednesday, the 9th of November 1938, there's a solemn commemorative march to the historic monument to fallen German officers that takes place around noon. At 5:30, Ernst vom Rath, promoted by Hitler after the shooting to embassy counselor, dies in Paris. At 8 p.m., party leaders and the old party stalwarts meet for an evening of comradeship in the old town hall in Munich. Almost the entire leadership of the SS is in the Hotel Wir Jahrzeiten. At 9 p.m., Hitler's informed of von Rath's death during dinner. He conducts an, quote, extraordinarily intense discussion, unquote, with the propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, who's sitting next to him, and then leaves the meeting right after dinner without, as is otherwise customary, addressing those assembled. He returns to his residence. 10 p.m. Shortly after Hitler leaves, Goebbels reports on von Rath's death and gives a speech in which he refers to anti-Jewish rallies in Kurhasand, Magdeburg-Anhalt, and adds, "The Fuhrer has decided at my suggestion that such demonstrations should neither be prepared nor organized by the party. However, to the extent that they are spontaneous, no attempt should be made to intervene." Those present interpret the speech to mean that the party should not appear from the outside to be the authors of the demonstrations, but in reality should organize and implement them. 10:30 p.m., The evening of comradeship comes to an end. The district leaders in attendance phone their district staffs from the old town hall and instruct them, in more or less precise form, to strike out, taking corresponding action against synagogues, Jewish homes, and businesses. The SA Chief of Staff, Victor Lutz, gathers the SA leadership in the old town hall and informs them in a brief speech about the situation. 11 p.m. The SA leaders return to their rooms in the Hotel Rheinischer Hof, from where they attempt until midnight to contact their units. 11:15, in Hotel Wir Jahrzeiten, Heydrich receives a call from headquarters of state police in Munich, informing him that the district propaganda staff for Munich Upper Bavaria has issued an order for the outbreak of an action against the Jews, according to which the state police should not interfere. Heydrich is surprised and asks SS Major General Karl Wolff to go to Himmler and request instructions. At 11:45, there's the first report of the burning of a Jewish house. Planach Castle, which belongs to Baron von Hirsch, has been set ablaze by unknown arsonists. 11:55, Gestapo Chief Heinrich Müller informs state police posts by teletype from Berlin that violence is expected against Jewish homes and businesses, adding the order that the state police should stay out of it. Thursday morning, November 10th, 1938, at 1 a.m. Immediately after the conclusion of the swearing-in ceremony, Himmler returns to Hotel Wir Jahrzeiten and gives Heydrich the following order. State police posts must act in accordance with the wishes of the propaganda offices, principally to prevent looting, protect individuals, and guarantee the safety of Jewish property. Uncompromising action should be taken against looters. In the case of fires, care should be taken that the fire department control the blaze and protect nearby buildings. 1:20 a.m. Heydrich dictates a telex to all state police posts containing the contents of Himmler's order and regulations regarding their sphere of authority vis-à-vis other agencies. The telex also orders that in all districts as many, quote, especially wealthy, unquote, Jews are to be arrested as can be accommodated. Immediate contact should be established with the relevant concentration camps regarding the swiftest possible internment of these Jews. 1:25 a.m., Himmler assembles the general SS leaders present and briefs them on the orders given by Heydrich. He forbids the deployment and participation of the general SS. 1:40, Goebbels, as Reich Minister of Propaganda, teletypes his old town hall speech to the district party offices. The propaganda offices are specially entrusted with directing and implementing the action. 3 a.m. Himmler dictates a memo to a member of his personal staff in which he makes brief reference to the events of the evening and notes that he has the impression Hitler was not informed about these events. Himmler closes with the words, quote, "The order comes from the Reich Propaganda Office, and I suspect that Goebbels, in his hunger for power, long since evident to me, and his blockheadedness, has given the start signal for the action. And he's done this specifically in a period that is so very difficult for us when it comes to foreign relations," unquote. 3:45 a.m. Heydrich sends another telex to the state police posts in which he once again underscores the prohibition against looting and points out that the Reich Justice Ministry has instructed the district attorneys to, quote, "make no investigations regarding the business of the actions against the Jews." But this is what it was like. A jarring sound jolts us awake in the middle of the night. Glass and wood of the apartment door shatter. My little sister and I sit up in our beds, uncomprehending. The noise gets louder, yet things are breaking and gruff male voices can be heard. My mother slips in from the adjacent bedroom and stations herself inside our closed door. Heavy steps rush from the living room at the front of the apartment to the dining room at its end. The sound of destruction heightens as china and crystal are thrown into the corridor. Suddenly I know. The Nazis have come to get us. They are smashing our things. My mother is trying to protect us. Inexplicably, the cold fear that grips me is not for my own life, but for my mother's. The Nazis will kill her. I cower. Then they are gone. Ghastly silence. We open the bedroom doors. No one is hurt. But the psychic shock is staggering. They knew the apartment layout. While staying away from the bedrooms, they reduced the living area to shambles. My father's Italian cello is nothing but splinters. The Bechstein piano smashed beyond repair. The Emil Nolde watercolors and the Paul Klee drawings are on the floor, crushed. The china and crystal, my mother's heirlooms, are in the apartment corridor in thousands of pieces. We do not say a word. We clean up so we can walk without getting cut. Kind neighbors from the apartment above come to help. They tell us of the citywide destruction. They make us find our voices again. Worse is to come, much worse. But a 12-year-old has absorbed the lesson. The orderly world in which only the police can get you and won't come unless you are a criminal, that world is gone. By fanning prejudice into hate, a government can turn a populace into assault troops. The Berlin correspondent of the London Daily Telegraph, Hugh Carlton Green, reported later on the 10th, quote, "Mob law ruled in Berlin throughout the afternoon and evening, and hordes of hooligans indulged in an orgy of destruction. I have seen several anti-Jewish outbreaks in Germany during the last 5 years, but never anything as nauseating as this. Racial hatred and hysteria seem to have taken complete hold of otherwise decent people. I saw fashionably dressed women clapping their hands and screaming with glee, while respectable middle-class mothers held up their babies to see the fun." Our own paper in Victoria, the Victoria Daily Colonist, reported on November 11, 1938, "At the height of the demonstration, few police were seen. One detachment of police in Friedrichstrasse in the heart of Berlin was charged by a mob which pushed them aside and began plundering. After more than 12 hours of violence, Goebbels appealed to the people to refrain from further demonstrations. All Jews in Munich were told they must leave the country within 48 hours, and many Jews feared Goebbels' concluding statement was a threat that the Munich order would be made nationwide. All of Vienna's 21 synagogues were burned. In Vienna, 22 Jews were said to have committed suicide. A dispatch said truckloads of Jews were taken by stormtroopers to Doltner Street and put to work tearing down a synagogue. In Munich, Aufhausers, the only remaining Jewish bank, was raided. One director and his wife committed suicide, and another was taken to a concentration camp. Private houses of Jews were entered in Nuremberg. Children were thrown out of bed. Furniture was smashed. In Cologne, crowds broke windows in nearly every Jewish shop, forced entrance into a synagogue, overturned its seats, and smashed the windows. The Salzburg synagogue was destroyed, and shops of Jewish tradesmen there were looted. Potsdam, Trulingen, Bamberg, Bayreuth, Everswald, Brandenburg, and Cottbus all reported synagogues raided, demolished, or burned. And then the next day, November 12th, the Washington Post reported, headline, "Nazis fine Jews $400 million, wipe out their businesses." Berlin. Nazi Germany's blackest week of anti-Semitic terror, destruction, and legal oppression were climaxed today with issuance by the government of the first of a series intended to destroy all that is left of the economic position of the Reich's 500,000 Jewish citizens. As a starter, a crushing fine of 1 billion marks was leveled on the German Jews in their entirety as a sort of racial punishment for the act of a single Polish Jew. Proceeds from the fine will go to the Reich. Other legal measures announced today provide, from the 1st of January 1939, a Jew may not own or operate in the Reich a retail establishment, export firm, mail-order house, or handicraft enterprise. From that same date, a Jew may not serve as a business leader, that is to say, in a managerial or supervisory capacity. A Jew who occupies an important position in a firm, though not as a business leader, may be dismissed on 6 weeks' notice without dismissal pay or provision for pension. The damage caused to Jewish enterprises and homes through the excesses of the last week must be repaired by the Jews concerned at their own expense. Insurance claims of Jews resulting from the anti-Semitic riots will be confiscated in favor of the Reich. But it was only in the 19th century, with the rise of modern biological, anthropological, and medical sciences, that a new form of anti-Semitism emerged, that of racial anti-Semitism. This modern version insists that the Jews are a race, not a religion, and a race to be at the same time feared for their powers and yet treated with contempt for their inferiority. It is the combination of historic Christian anti-Semitism which provided the fertile ground for modern racial anti-Semitism, so powerfully developed in the late 19th and early 20th century Europe, and the fascist ideology of the early 20th century that brings us here today to think about Kristallnacht.